Welcome to Just the Two of Us Homestead. We are Colleen and Frank, and we live in the perfect size homestead just for us in southwestern Quebec. Gardening, growing food, and preserving is one of our passions. And our barn animals, we love them so much, they're just like pets. And we're so fortunate to be able to live our lives as we do. Each and every day is a blessing. Hello, friends. Tonight we're going to try a new recipe. It's a cheesy chicken casserole with chicken, bacon, pasta, cheese, cream of thing soup, and chicken broth, and a few spices. So it's a new recipe to me. I thought I'd bring you along, and we're going to get started right away. I'm excited to try this. We're going to be using boneless, skinless chicken breast, and we're going to cut it into cube-sized pieces, like bite-sized pieces. And in hindsight, you could easily use chicken thighs. Either one would work great. Just over 2 pounds, which the recipe called for, so I just went with what I had defrosted. Frying the chicken in a cast iron frying pan, and that'll come into play in a few minutes, and I'll explain why. Because the original recipe that I saw, she did it in a non-stick frying pan, so it's being cooked in bacon grease. You're supposed to cook your bacon first in the pan and then cook the chicken in the bacon grease. Well, I cooked my bacon in the oven and then just poured the bacon grease into the cast iron, and I'm getting my water ready for the pasta at the same time, and I'm just giving it a little bit of salt. And for the recipe, I'm using very little salt in this recipe because of the canned soup and the bacon. They already have a lot of salt in them, so I'm only putting a little bit. So I'm putting about a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, you can put any seasonings you want. When I first make a recipe, I always go by the directions at first, and then if I make it again, I can alter it to anything I like at that point. I'm putting about half a teaspoon of black pepper, and then I'm only putting about half a teaspoon, not even, of kosher salt. And I put about half to 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt in the pasta water, and that's all the salt I used throughout the whole recipe. And it was perfect. I didn't even need to salt it on my plate. The water's boiling, so it takes 1 pound of pasta. The recipe said rotini pasta, so that's what I used. And all your chicken is going to do the cooking in the frying pan. It's just going to warm up in the oven. So I want to get a good sear on it, and I want to cook it. So it's all going to get done here. I'm just going to move it around so it all gets a nice sear everywhere and gets cooked. I'm really scraping the bottom of the pan here. If you had a non-stick pan, you wouldn't necessarily have that, and it's going to change the recipe in just a little bit, but I want to get all those good tasting bits there, so I'm really giving it a good scrape. Because the recipe calls for half a cup of chicken broth, it's only supposed to be added into the bowl when you're mixing it all, but I added it into my pan so I could kind of deglaze it and get all of those good tasting bits of the chicken. But because I did that, I think I reduced the liquid a bit. In hindsight, I probably would have added like about 3/4 of a cup of chicken broth. but it added a ton of flavor to the casserole by doing this. I don't regret doing it at all. And I let the pasta cook for about 9 minutes according to the package. So we poured. Frank had to help me. I can't lift that frying pan. We put the chicken in a bowl, and here he is just putting the chicken broth in for me. And at this point, it's just mixing it all together. So I have the chicken broth. Now I'm just adding the pasta in. You need a big bowl. This makes a 9 by 13. I was going to cut it in half at first, and I thought, no, let's just go for it all. So it's 2 cans of cream of chicken and mushroom. I found it together in 1 can. Otherwise, you could just use 1 can of cream of chicken and 1 can of cream of mushroom. And a quarter cup of sour cream. I think I forgot to mention that at the beginning. And I think it says about 8 ounces or something of Monterey Jack cheese, but I know I used more than it said, and I don't regret that either. We just mix this all together, and the color of my casserole came out darker because of the cast iron pan and the glazing. The original recipe came out like a lot whiter looking, but I'm telling you that gave it so much flavor. So it's a lot of stirring, and I was so hesitant to make this because Frank's really not a fan of like cream of anything, but he I, I I don't have words for how much he loved this recipe. I really thought, what am I going to do with this 9 by 13 casserole? Well, I've eaten maybe a third of it. We've been eating on it for 2 days. He loves it, just loves it. And so do I. Now, this would definitely be more of a comfort food meal, but I've been watching a lot of videos and going through recipe books trying to get inspired to make a few new meals, and this is a hit. We will definitely be having this more. And it was so fast to make, even with like moving the camera around. It was so fast and easy and pretty inexpensive too. So you just flatten it down in your casserole. And this recipe called for 8 pieces of bacon that you cooked before. Well, I only had 4. Frank had made pancakes for breakfast that morning, and there was only 4 pieces left, so that's what I went with. So I'm sure it would have tasted even better with 8 pieces. This is a thick cut bacon we get from the Amish. It's applewood smoke. So I just cut up the 4 pieces we had. You sprinkle that on top. So I imagine with 8 pieces it would be even better, but I didn't miss it. It was delicious either way. And then you put the cheese on top of the bacon. And like I said, I think I even used a bit more cheese than the recipe called for, but I always do. In case someone's new here, I just wanted to point out that my hands are very, very clean. It's the same day that I did the pickled beets, so I still have tomato tar, and now I have pickled beet hands. So my hands are very clean. They're just a little, have a dirt manicure and now pickled beet hands. It's going into, I think it was a 375 oven for 30 to 35 minutes. I'm going to put the recipe down in the description box. And here it is. It looks much better coming out than going in. I don't know if you can hear it sizzling there, but it looks beautiful and tastes so good. And here is our dinner plated up with our pickled beets and our mini cucumbers from the garden and our delicious casserole. Thanks for joining us for supper tonight. And until we're together again, take care.